Hey, everybody. I'm so excited to invite you to my interview with Chris Wyllie. He is a neuroscientist who has done over 5,000 brain scans, mine included. And he is going to share with us how to keep your brain healthy, how to optimize for wellness. He has studied with Shaolin monks and with Dr. Richard Bandler, one of my all-time favorite heroes on the face of the earth. And he has studied with him for 10 years. So I'm really excited to bring you this interview with Chris Wyllie. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry, and my guest today is Chris Wyllie. He is a neuroscientist who has performed over 5,000 QEEG brain maps, scientifically testing how meditation, nutrition, nootropics, NLP, and hypnosis rewire the brain. Chris has a private practice in Toronto, Canada, performing brain scans, neurotherapy, and NLP, working with children with autism, ADHD, and learning disorders, as well as professional athletes such as UFC fighters, basketball, and football players. Chris is an apprentice of Dr. Richard Bandler, the co-creator of NLP, an official disciple of a Shaolin monk, and has trained directly with some of the leading brain scientists on the planet. Chris's mission is to study and optimize the human brain. He began this at age 19 when he was hospitalized with severe anxiety and panic attacks. Since then, Chris has pioneered new cross-discipline approaches to optimize the brain. He walks the walk and is a master of putting science into practice for real-life results. Welcome, Chris.
That was quite the introduction, Tara.
We just did a conference together with Dr. Richard Bandler, who has got to be one of the most brilliant human beings on the face of the planet. And if we were to ask anybody there who is the most vibrantly healthy looking human there, it would have to be you. And it wasn't always that way, though. You surprised us when you shared with us your past. And tell us what your health challenges were in the past, what you tried to do at the time to solve them, and how you reached out into other areas to seek relief and maximize your health.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, everything you read off there in that bio are different disciplines that I explored and scientifically tested to first and foremost heal and rewire my own brain. And I actually never intended on studying the brain in terms of a career, but growing up and throughout my early adulthood, I always dealt with really severe anxiety and panic attacks. Also had an addictive tendencies in my own brain that led to some harmful self behaviors. And long story short, I was actually hospitalized at the end of my second year at university. I was down to maybe 140 pounds, emaciated, totally broken down mentally and behaviorally. I was doing things which were totally out of character, and I was in a really dark place. And I can remember the moment clear as day. It was maybe 4 a.m. in the morning. I was laying in that hospital bed there, and I looked up at the clock, and then I looked in the mirror, and I just looked at myself and asked myself, "What am I doing here?" And, it was time right then and there. I made a decision that enough was enough, and I was gonna do everything possible to learn about the brain and heal the brain and really dive into my passions, which always surrounded health. But now this was my stimulus, this breakdown to dive fully in. So the next day I showed up to the dean's office and I was like, "Mr. Dean, I'm no longer studying business. I am studying neuroscience." So dove into neuroscience, got a major in psychology, and discovered my calling, so to speak. And all the work I do today are things that I've personally tested and utilized first in myself to heal and rewire my own brain. So I had a brain that was in big trouble.
And you're a tall guy. How tall are you?
I'm like a little over 6'2".
So 140 pounds is pretty emaciated for you.
Yeah, if I were to show you some pictures, it's even painful for me to even look at some of the pictures. But hey, we all have our own kryptonite. We all have our own breakdown, and like I tell a lot of my clients and people, the earlier in your life you can experience that breakdown, the earlier you can discover your true calling and purpose and passion in this life. And that's when you really come alive.
That's so great. So, for our listeners that aren't familiar, what exactly is a QEEG?
Yeah. So most people may be familiar with EEG, electroencephalography. They tend to utilize them in hospitals to detect for seizure activity. The Q part stands for quantitative. So this is where we can take EEGs, and I do brain scans testing all types of conditions: eyes open, eyes closed, hypnosis, NLP, trance. As we saw at the seminar, we brought someone up on stage and put someone in a trance and saw their brainwaves changing, which was a pretty powerful experience for people. So the Q just stands for quantitative, where we can take all this EEG data and we can compute how the brain and different brain regions across the cortex, how much of each frequency range they're producing. How does that compare to a normative database? How does that compare to within their own brain? So it's really the cutting edge of EEG technology, and a huge piece that I use to help people to better understand the brain is the QEEG brain mapping.
So, let's see if we can share that experience with our listeners. You had somebody on the stage, wired up to the cap with all the gels that make it electrically connective.
Mhm.
It was um, enormously eye opening for all of us to see that just by walking somebody through a certain amount of processes, you literally got an instantaneous change to the brainwaves.
Absolutely. So
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you.
a lot of things, especially the field of NLP and even the field of psychology, it's we have the subjective experience where people feel changed. Like with NLP, you have like the fast phobia cure, and people can do things they couldn't do before. You have trance, and people feel more relaxed, right? But for me, when I first saw that, I was curious. Okay, what's actually happening in the brain here? So I use the neuroscience of NLP module I was teaching as an opportunity to show the entire group of students, okay, this is what brainwave activity looks like in a waking state, and look how quickly and powerfully we can change that by going into trance. And for example, we saw, you know, a decrease in fast wave, high beta waves, which are normally associated with stress, overthinking, anxiety, just being alert. And then we saw the emergence of those high amplitude alpha waves across the occipital, across the parietal lobes, that are associated with those really deep relaxed states. So for me, it was a really exciting opportunity to show the entire class, but these are the powerful brainwave changes that are occurring during trance. And this is in part why in trance people can do things and have mental and behavioral freedom and have, superpowers come online because they're getting into an altered brain state. And here I can actually scientifically show that altered state in terms of brain activity.
So, Tony Robbins is famous for saying that you can't manage what you don't measure. And what is so cool is that you're mapping out all these people's brains and the changes that are going along with that. Um, eh, Joe Dispenza, for example, says that the brain, I'm sure a lot of people say this, is the greatest pharmacy on the face of the earth.
For sure.
Would you agree with that? And what kind of changes can we, when we optimize our brain waves, can we experience in terms of what's being released in the brain?
Well, absolutely. Well, our brain and nervous system, they communicate both electrically and chemically. And let's face it, our neurochemistry and the neurotransmitters that are active in our synapses have a profound influence on our state of consciousness and how we feel. And there's many ways that we can control and alter our neurochemistry to develop greater control over our state of being. So feelings, thoughts, they are chemically based. And the wonderful thing about the work and the research I've done is that we can change our neurochemistry with pure thought and consciousness itself. And by changing our neurochemistry, it's going to change how we feel and therefore change how we're able to perform. So I'm always looking at neurochemistry from the context as to how can we develop greater control and greater balance across these different neurochemicals so that way we can have a more joyful, a greater experience, a greater range of emotionality and behaviors to be more dynamic as human beings.
And a few of the neurotransmitters that you shared with us that we can optimize is things like dopamine, serotonin, choline. Can you talk about those and what roles they play in feeling good and having
Yes.
optimal brain function?
Yes. Well, dopamine these days gets all the press, right? But some of these other neurotransmitters like choline steal the show. Because going through these different neurochemicals, well, basically, from the overview, you have the principal excitatory neurotransmitter in the brain, which is glutamate. So glutamate, causes excitation of neurons. Then you have the opposite of that, which is GABA, which is like the brakes in the brain. Now, the brain, in terms of chemistry, it's all about balance. So we want that nice dynamic balance of gas pedal and brakes, of green lights and red lights, so you have optimal traffic flow. So a lot of the problems people have today, whether it's insomnia or anxiety related disorders, or I work with a lot of autistic children, it's because the balance of gas pedal and brakes is off in the brain. And it's usually because there's actually too much overexcitation, too much glutamate, and it causes a phenomenon called glutamate-induced excitotoxicity. And it's a major problem. So all the parents with kids watching this, or anyone with anxiety disorders, if you're just feeling chronically stressed, if you just feel like just a sense of internal turmoil or lack of well-being, it could be because of excessive glutamate. And that's just because of all the stressors and toxins. And I also scientifically test how EMFs, like from our cell phone and radiation, how that influences the brain. So you want to look at an overview, get that nice balance of glutamate and GABA. Then we have these neuromodulators like dopamine. What dopamine does is dopamine is like a focusing agent. And it does two things. As we know, people talk about like reward, oh, it releases dopamine. Well, the purpose of that is to help our brain consolidate circuits that produce successful behaviors. So when we do something, we succeed or we get a win, our brain releases dopamine to basically tell itself, oh, whoa, save that one. So it helps with the consolidation of learnings. But then also, dopamine is a focusing agent, helping us to sustain and lock our point of attention on a task. So for all of you anyone of you who's watching this, and if you got a little bit of the squirrel brain, where it's this, that, here, there, and before you know it, you're like a squirrel shifting back and forth, you probably need to elevate dopamine levels to help yourself lock in. Now, the only thing to be mindful of is more isn't necessarily a good thing. And you can identify anyone who's taking too much speed or too much, or even cocaine. I work with those kind of clients as well, is that you can have the overfixation on thoughts, and that can create paranoia, can create OCD kind of behaviors. So too much of a good thing becomes not a good thing. So basically, dopamine is a focusing agent. So um, you can either have too much, you can have too little. You just want that nice dynamic balance. So my kind of philosophy is I like dopamine dominance during the day. Catecholamines high, energized, motivated, driven. And then I want serotonin to relax the night away, because serotonin has the opposite action on our psychology and behavior. Serotonin opens up flexibility in the brain, opens up neural flexibility. And I see that on brain scans I do. Also opens up cognitive flexibility. So if anyone's watching this and if you feel stuck on repetitive thought patterns or behaviors and you get in those negative loops, perhaps raising serotonin can help give you the cognitive and behavioral flexibility to get out of that. And there's many different strategies to raise serotonin. A basic one is timing, even just timing your carbohydrates. So I'll have complex carbohydrates mostly in the early evening time. That will raise the selective concentration of tryptophan in the blood, raises serotonin in the brain to help produce that nice relaxation response. And that's where even things like exercise are great, whether it's weightlifting or cardiovascular or either yoga and Tai Chi. You'll know that feeling of well being you get at the end of the workout where you just feel more expanded. You feel more mentally free and flexible. That's because the brain is now higher in serotonin. And then the last one you mentioned was acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is a really powerful neuromodulator, both for short-term brain health and long-term brain health. And acetylcholine is kind of the governor of our thinking speed. So if your brain feels sharp, fast, witty, and you're quick with language, you're quick with processing, you're typically high in acetylcholine. But if you have the opposite, where you feel like you got a bit of the brain fog going on, or your mind feels cloudy or unclear or slow, or your memory started to decline a little, you might want to look at acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is constructed from, dietary choline that we get in our foods, and the brain uses that to construct acetylcholine. So acetylcholine is one of the ones that falls off a cliff in Alzheimer's and dementia and cognitive decline. And, there's even, you develop the Alzheimer's drugs to try to raise choline. I always prefer a kind of more natural, sustainable approach, giving the brain the raw materials to nutrition. So
And what are your
choline,
favorite raw materials for choline? I'm guessing egg yolks would be one of those things, or
yeah, egg yolks are absolutely one, and choline's loaded in seafood.
Mm.
So seafood is brain food. Has lots of choline, has lots of what's called DMAE, which is also another precursor for acetylcholine. Seafood's also loaded with the omega-3 fatty acids. My favorite, the king of nutrition, DHA, docosahexaenoic acid, because what that fatty acid does, that has a very special quantum properties where it's selectively integrated into our cell membranes and synapses. It gives our cells the flexibility and fluidity so it can change and bend shape and then promote electrical signaling. And of course, the better electrical signaling we have in the brain, the stronger our consciousness and cognition is going to be. So,
and you're coming out with a book, I understand, which is super exciting because having looked at 5,000 Brains and worked with people with all these incredible tools, NLP, neurotherapy, hypnosis, and actually measured how the brain scans change. Tell us about the book coming out, and what do we get to be surprised about?
well, there's a few books coming out. The top priority is scientifically studying how NLP changes the brain. Now, I don't know what I can and cannot say here, but basically, I'm in the midst of performing extensive research on how NLP, neuro linguistic programming, and the various techniques of NLP, whether that's to get rid of bad memory technique or the fast phobia cure or trance itself, or deep trance phenomenon like arm catalepsy, studying how these different techniques change the brain, as well as looking at the foundations of NLP and where's the neuroplasticity behind it, why NLP works in terms of the brain and neurological level. So I have a co-partner who's writing that book with me. Uh,
I'm
he
guessing
happens,
that's Dr. Bandler.
well, I can't say,
I
but
know, but if we
uh,
could say, I'm just kidding.
he's the guy who created the
Wink, wink,
field.
wink.
So we're working together on the project, and I'm really, really excited to really add the scientific backing and the scientific exploration, which has never really been systematically done before, to really show the world, hey, look, this is why NLP works, and these are the changes we're seeing in the brain.
Yeah.
And and for me, I've tested, companies hire me. There's a company out there, they make devices that you put on the phone that protects against EMF. I pioneered QEEG testing for them, so they're basically using that as their main form of marketing, where now they're going, look, here's your brain with a cell phone next to your ear without our device. Here's your brain scan with the device, and the company's exploding. So I'm really excited to show the world how NLP changes the brain.
Can you tell
So
us
that
the name of that company? Because that's useful information.
yeah, the name the company's called Aries Tech.
Okay.
Yeah, they're doing a lot of work with UFC fighters. So I've had a chance to work with some UFC fighters through them. Um, and yeah, I mean, their whole marketing is basically based on the process of testing the brain I pioneered 10 years ago. And I was testing that product 10 years ago, wondering, why doesn't more people know about this? Like, this is producing some really incredible changes in the brain. Well, now they're taking the world by storm. So, sometimes it just takes time.
So you're not a big fan, I understand, of the wireless ear things because of the amount of radiation that gets to the brain. Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah, well, in terms of, with people asking, why are EMFs from our cell phones, from our devices, why are they a problem? Well, they do two things. The first thing was there's a Dr. Alan Frey in the 1970s. He showed that non-native radiation increases the leakiness of the blood-brain barrier,
Mm.
which thereby makes the deep structures in our brain more susceptible to assault from toxins in our food and our environment. So we hear the talk about the leaky gut,
Mm.
but we don't hear the talk about the leaky blood-brain barrier.
Mm.
For me, that's a really problematic thing. And the second thing is these EMFs alter the flow of ions, which are charged particles like calcium. And this is how neurons signal to each other. So EMFs, basically, as I've tested and the research shows, that they're a biological stressor. So they increase the stimulation of the brain. And when I do brain scans and I put a cell phone next to the ear, I can literally see the fast wave stress wave associated with stress, like high beta, increasing locally in those parts of the brain. So it definitely does produce a stress response in the brain. So we're not going to eliminate technology. Technology is a wonderful thing. We're able to communicate through it. Now, a question is, how can we just mitigate any unnecessary stress in our brain? So, no cell phones devices next to my brain.
And so even if you have the wired thing in your ears, that's also not the best.
Wired's preferable. So
Wired?
I still use the corded one. I do have my phone preferably on airplane mode when it's in my pocket. I do have one of the little devices, one of those little Aries Tech on my phone. Just because I've tested them and they do improve brain activity. So if they improve the nervous system, it's going to have a positive effect on our biology. Now, of course, the best strategy is elimination of EMFs, right? So
Which
if
is
anyone's
just tricky, especially when people have smart meters on their homes. And
yeah,
I actually was going to move into an office, and it turned out that it was next to the electrical panel for the entire building.
mm,
Fortunately, I went in and tested it before I moved in there, and did not move in there because it was fried with the EMFs.
yeah, yeah.
So, what are some of the most typical imbalances that you see? Yeah,
Well, I wouldn't use the term difficult. Oh, typical,
yeah.
typical. Well, it really depends on what we're talking about, right? So one just for the bracket for the parents at home and have kids is I work with a ton of children with autism
Mhm.
and children on the spectrum, and there can be incredible variance and diversity across that. But there are certain hallmarks, certain brain imbalances I see over and over again in children with autism and learning disorders. And one of them is that the brain is notoriously low in alpha rhythm. There's little to no alpha wave production at all across the brain, eyes open, eyes closed across different states. So it basically means these kids have no middle ground neutral gear. And they're either in a state of hyperstimulation, sympathetic dominance, or parasympathetic dominance of too much slow wave activity, causing cognitive deficits and cognitive delays. So that's, one example. Now, when people look at the term, like, let's say that a term like ADHD, this is a generalized label that is a function of certain processes where an individual doesn't have the ability to focus. Now, that could be caused by a multitude of things. Could be caused by overactive frontal lobes. So too much fast wave activity in the frontal lobes causing excessive overthinking, busy brain, hyper distractibility. And of course, if you have too many thoughts going on in your mind at a single time, it's difficult for you to keep track of and focus on one to talk. Or we could have the opposite where you have hypofrontality. So the frontal lobes aren't activating or aren't producing enough fast wave activity to promote long-term potentiation and thinking. And this is why I do the brain scans with my clients to be able to assess uniquely how their brain is firing and then use that to design specific protocols to then balance brain activity to help turn on focus, working memory, executive function. So that way, if you're an adult, you have difficulty focusing, you do have the ability to focus now. If you're a kid, or for the kids out there, they do have the capacity to fire their frontal lobes to pay attention on even boring stuff.
And I'm guessing that you support that with a lot of lifestyle things as well, that
Mhm.
hyper or hypo prefrontal activity.
Yes.
So if their diet's too full of simple sugars, or they're on their cell phones all the time, or video games all the time, they're not spending any time in nature, they're not getting enough exercise. Can you kind of round out for us the other things that you look at?
Yes. So my goal when working with a client is to get them self-sufficient and independent as quick as possible. So I'm only one guy. I can only see, one person at a time. And for me, I want to empower people to identify what are the key variables they can use to help rewire and change the brain. So when I do a brain scan assessment, I'll go through person's environment, environmental changes, and that could be EMF, could be light, could be, all the other forces that are in the environment influencing them. Absolutely nutrition, right? Helping nutrition is one of the easiest, fastest ways. It's what we put in our body. It's the raw materials our brain uses to build its neurochemistry. So helping to dial in the nutrition 100%. And sometimes just subtle tweaks, right? For people who are having memory issues or brain fog, maybe it's just adding more choline in the diet, right? Or if I'm looking at the brain, I'm seeing the energetics are low, a little protocol to get the mitochondria producing more energy to get more voltage in the brain. So nutrition is a huge piece that I like to help people dial in. Then we have our psychology, and that's where the NLP comes in, and meditation comes in, and different cognitive therapies and techniques come in, because we can use our mind to activate the desired parts of our brain to help basically strengthen them. So, people go to the gym, they pump their biceps, or I pump my bicep to get bigger biceps, right? You can work your frontal lobes to increase your frontal lobe activation. And then, for more kind of advanced, I have technologies that can actually modulate and stimulate the brain, right? So if we wanted to increase beta wave production in the left prefrontal cortex, technologies that can send in frequency to activate the brain in that range. But for me, I really like to set people up with a blueprint of things they can do at home, daily practices that over time can help build and rebuild their neurology to get them to the level they want to get to.
Are you able to work with people virtually?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've done so many brain scans. A wild thing happens since you studied with NLP and you just experienced. We have sensory calibration where you can look at a person's eyes, their breathing, their different nonverbal and verbal markers, and you can see them changing states. I mean, I can almost look at a human being and I can see the parts of their brain that are firing their brainwave output. And without even having to scan, it's getting to that level. But absolutely, I can tailor lifestyle recommendations. I still do NLP and neurotherapy virtually. Obviously, in person is king because that's where our mirror neurons can really entrain, and I can um, really influence someone at the neurological energetic level. But absolutely, I can help someone dial in the environment, their nutrition, their lifestyle, their mental activity, their physical activities to optimize the key functions they want for their brain.
And the phenomena of mirror neurons is really fascinating for people on the call not familiar with them. Can you explain what a mirror neuron is and why it's so important?
Yeah. So we have these special neurons which are found in our frontal lobes, our premotor cortex, as well as our parietal lobes. And these are neurons that fire in our brain when we observe someone perform an activity. And they fire in such a way that it's as if you were performing the activity ourselves. So it's almost by watching someone, these mirror neurons fire, and by watching, we become one, and we are not watching, we are doing with them. So these are the basis of empathy. Empathy mirror neurons, or Gandhi neurons, so to speak, as one of my favorite neuroscientists calls them. So basically, these neurons are the reason why who we associate with is so important. The people we study and learn from, it's so important because we don't only observe, we become like that which we observe, and your neurons are the reason why.
So, for our listeners, if we were watching a mime or an actor pretending they had a big cleaver in their hand, and all of a sudden they, took an accidental slice through their finger and reacted, our neurology would react in sync with that person. Is that kind of the idea?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Um, so there are a number of different brain technologies out there. I'm curious what you think of the difference between an active tool and a passive tool.
Hmm.
So things like brain spotting or low energy neurofeedback, um,
Hmm.
all these different technologies versus uh, taking control of your own focus and
Hmm.
changing your brainwaves that way. Can you comment on maybe
Yes.
maybe they both have a role to play in this healing process?
Mm. Well, I'm a big fan of active, deliberate focus. So, active, deliberate focus is where you pay full concentration and attention on the task at hand. And it's been shown to enhance the plasticity of the human brain. Now, full focus and concentration could be on anything. It could be on a physical workout. It could be on a meditation, a mantra. It could be painting, doing art. But basically, you want to train your ability to impose your frontal executive networks to override whatever unconscious emotional responses your brain has maybe learned through traumas, through fears, through conditioning. So, this is where we can use our conscious neurology, our frontal executive networks, the power of focus to really modulate the firing of our amygdala, for example, because there's direct connections between the frontal lobes and the amygdala, the hippocampus and the amygdala. So I'm a big fan of doing any practice that really require you to engage full focus. And that's what I believe people need in this world. There's so much distractibility. They need to train their ability to perform full, unadulterated focus.
And part of
And
your training is with a Shaolin monk. Would love to hear
yes.
about that because they're incredible masters of this, are they not?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when I was like a 19-year-old boy and I was going through my difficulties, I was always drawn to the Eastern philosophy and arts. I just thought that they had something figured out about being superhuman. And I'd see these monks and these different things. And, I always had a little part of me that wanted to be a little bit more superhuman. I just don't want to be a natural human. I want to be a little bit more super.
Like they
I
can
think,
meditate in the snow with, total calmness and melt the snow around them. And what are
mm,
some of the other things that you saw them do?
Yeah, well, on the Sifu I learned from, um, I mean, there was a lot of acrobats and kung fu and incredible things. When I was studying with my Sifu Shaolin monks, so basically how it worked, I was 19. I started training with the Shaolin Qigong master. I'm from Markham, Markham, Toronto, Canada. We have a great, huge Asian community, so there's a lot of great access to the Chinese philosophy and arts. So I was training with this Qigong master and I was learning some great things about meditation. And of course, for me, being the science geek, I was testing how meditation was changing my brain, and the results and changes were incredible.
And what did you see there?
Well, I would see like an immediate 7x increase in voltage in alpha, for example, whole brain, and nothing was producing that. Nothing that I had tested. No drug, no nootropic, no chemical, and for me this was great. It was pure natural, pure consciousness to change the brain. I have that all on video actually. When a little baby face me, testing Shaolin meditation on the brain, and then one Chinese New Year, there was a Shaolin monk in from Shaolin performing, and I saw him performing, and I saw the grace, the bliss, the power, and I thought, this is a human being. He spent the whole life only and exclusively studying Shaolin philosophy. I want to learn from him. So I went to the monk, and he was staying in Canada for a period of time for around 2 3 years. I trained with him, and I started training with him, and he didn't speak any English, so I had to. It was full nonverbal modeling of what he was doing. So if he put me in a horse stance, I didn't move until he told me to move.
Wow.
And there'd be times I'd be there for 30, 45 minutes, and after 2 minutes, your legs are on fire, starting to shake, but if Sifu doesn't say to move, you don't move. You just keep going. Because I always wanted to be a student to earn the respect of the master and to get them to teach me what they know. He did have a translator, so I did get some translation, but it was a beautiful. I learned different Shaolin Kung Fu, meditation, Shen style Tai Chi, Yang style Tai Chi, and that really, really eradicated and transformed all that energy and anxiety. That was one of the most profound things that rewired my brain. I got the brain scans to prove it. It got me very, very far. Now, there were still levels I had to get to, which is why I learned from Dr. Richard Bandler and NLP. So it's been a constant building process of finding higher and higher level skills to rewire the brain.
So you've been working with Dr. Bandler for what, 10 years?
Yeah, since I was around 22, 23 years old.
Wow. He is one of the most intelligent human beings I've ever met on planet Earth.
Mhm.
Can you share with us some of the surprising takeaways you've
Yes.
gleaned from spending time with him?
Yeah. Well, the one thing about genius is they just think different, they process different than anyone you've ever met, right? And when I went and saw him, I saw him doing things, saying things, being able to accomplish transformations that I'd never seen before. And when I saw Dr. Bandler working on stage with clients, whether it was rewiring a fear or doing the incredible hypnosis he does, I looked at what he was able to do through pure thought, pure language. I said, those are skills I need to add to my arsenal. And for me, every time I can have one conversation um, with Richard, and he can just say one thing, and that one golden nugget is more than I could get by reading 50 books. I've been working on writing so many books for so long, and he just looked at me and he said, "You know what, Chris? I don't write books. I finish them." And I changed that one word in my head. Boom, it got connected with my motivation strategy. And now I'm plowing through and finishing these books like no tomorrow. And we got a deadline of February 2026 for this first one. So I'm putting it out there. So that book will be available March 2026 for the seminars in the spring.
Can't wait. I'm looking at my literal stack of Richard Bandler books right there behind me. So uh what is the average length of time somebody works with you? What's the shortest length of time somebody's worked with you? What's the longest length of time? And I know that's kind of a ridiculous question because
Yeah.
when you're working with autistic kids, I mean, they're all over the place in terms of the
Yes.
amount of impairments. And
Mhm.
I'm sure you get that with other things too. So just give us an idea of what's kind of average, what can be like miraculously quick, what takes longer.
Yeah. So the longest cases would be those neurological imbalances, autism, epilepsy, learning disorders. So for there, I do the brain scan assessments, then I customize the neurotherapy. So that's where I'm doing, different neuromodulation to stimulate and modulate how the brain's firing. And that does take repeated training, repeated sessions, and requires in person. So there are kids that, I've worked with for years. But the nice thing is I have so much experience with different modalities, is that generally speaking, within one session time, we can get improvements with the child in terms of behavior, in terms of language, in terms of sleep. And for most parents, that is very exciting and gives them a ton of hope. And then it's just a matter of continuing to train the neurology so that these new patterns of firing the circuitry gets hardwired and sticks.
What's the youngest client you've ever worked with?
The youngest is probably around the 2.5.
How do you work with a 2-year-old and get them to shift things?
Very well. I mean, I will. I have to use very small caps, but it's usually the 2.5 to 4-year-old range is the youngest. Um, and every case is different. So I'll do the scan. I'll see how the brain's firing. And then even from that, if I think they're a little bit too young to start any neurotherapy, I'll help them guide the nutritional interventions, the lifestyle interventions, um, to clean up their life to help promote the development for the child. So they're usually around the 2.5. I like more of like 4. Give the brain a chance to develop a little bit, see where it's at 4, and then start doing some neurotherapy there.
And then one of the tools that you offer are like soundtracks with alpha waves and theta waves and gamma waves. So, do you use those frequently with the clients that you're working with, or
Mhm. To answer the second half of your last question, the shortest I work with a client is 1 session.
right?
So that's usually where a client has a problem of some sort. And in terms of optimizing their psychology, I'll do the NLP work to help reprogram the mind. I'll give them a blueprint, a plan. This could even be virtual, uh, certain variables they need to control to balance their chemistry based on the symptoms they have and the desired results they want, maybe for focus or for memory or for sleep. So yeah, the shortest is 1 session and you can get improvements. I always recommend though, at least 1 session, at least 1 follow-up or multiple follow-ups over time if one is really serious about optimizing your brain. Geez, I could be driving a Ferrari right now with the amount I've invested in my own brain. So, 1, 2 sessions, um, it's a worthwhile investment.
Well, especially with parents with an autistic child, that's priceless what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah. That's my passion. That's my heart. I love anything to help set the kids up for success and just
A lot of
like that
people have
dogs.
a lot of people have a lot of questions and a lot of trepidation and a lot of frustration when it comes to meditation. Can you offer some insight there? What meditation types do you recommend to people? What are the biggest mistakes that people are making?
Yeah. Well, meditation is basically a name given to sets of techniques that involve focusing your mind to produce an altered state. So this is similar to trance in a sense that you're designed to get out of your normal waking state into an altered state. The biggest problem that which could be one of silence, one of relaxation, one of clarity, one of calm. The biggest mistake I see with people with meditation is they just try too damn hard. They're doing all these complex, convoluted visualization processes. And what people need, and anyone, if you're watching this, what you need is you need to experience the opposite of your brain's normal tendency and patterns. So if you're an intellectual beast and you're constantly problem solving and thinking, and your brain is chronically turned on, yellow fast wave beta waves, you need the exact opposite of that. You need to experience a state of total emptiness and silence to enable to connect it with the unconscious mind, to allow your conscious and unconscious to communicate better, and also to allow your frontal executive networks to just deactivate a little bit so they can chemically and electrically rejuvenate. So you got more battery power to work with when you're actually focusing. So that's where the highest form of meditation I learned from the Shaolin monk is pure emptiness, pure silence. And it takes training to get there, but basically a pure silence, and I measure this on brain scans, is you're fully deactivating the frontal executive networks, allowing the other parts of your brain, sensory, perceptual, emotional networks, to have better communication. And from that pure state of silence, that pure emptiness, comes power, comes focus, comes memory, creativity. So that is a very powerful state of meditation. And that is something a lot of the clients I work with, whether they're business executives or athletes, their brains are always running, they're always thinking. So to get them into a state that is the exact opposite of that is a very powerful experience. And that's the type of meditation I'll do for maybe 10, 15 minutes before bed. It's just pure emptiness.
And what does one focus on, at least initially? Those people that constantly say, I have no control over my thoughts. They just come in and I have no control over them.
Yeah. Well, first off, for those types of people, it's probably worthwhile for them to come out to like an NLP seminar, either an intro seminar, maybe even a practitioner seminar, to learn how to develop greater control over your conscious mind. So that's a really powerful set of techniques for that. Um, Really, in terms of meditation, to get into a state of emptiness, what we use is we use a tool of single pointed focus. So you focus on one thing over and over again. So that could be deep diaphragmatic breathing. So you're just focusing exclusively on your lower abdomen, your diaphragm. And then whenever your focus wanders, you bring it right back to the abdomen, focusing on that one point over and over and over again. And what happens in your brain is that you focus over and over again on that one point, is eventually your frontal lobes will habituate and begin to deactivate. And you'll get into an altered state where your mind starts to become more silent and calm. And when you access that state, that's when you just sit and you just bathe in that state. And then maybe, initially you're there for maybe 1-2 minutes and your brain, your conscious mind turns back on. Okay, great. Then you go back and focus again on that one point until you get back into that state of silence. And then very quickly, your brain will learn how to get there more automatically. And then you'll just be able to close your eyes and get into that state of silence. And I measured that in my clients, myself, in the alpha wave production in that state is profound. Um, Huge increases in alpha. So a little secret to everyone watching this, all you high performers, high achievers, you want to go out and do these guided visualization, visualize your dreams, do the opposite. Slow down to speed up.
Love it. Thank you. What about people with Alzheimer's? Have you had results there?
hmm
Can you tell us
Well,
about that?
Alzheimer's, yes. So again, Alzheimer's is there's a lot of complex mechanisms that tends to be inflammation and in the medial temporal lobes and in the hippocampus there. So getting inflammation in those parts of the brain down, and that's where nutrition is very effective. And that's where our polyphenol-rich foods, our green tea, our blueberries, our cacao, our turmeric root, our omega-3 fatty acids, our choline-rich foods, very important. Then I do the actual neurotherapy to actually stimulate the medial temporal networks to help rebalance the brain activity. Then I'll give clients mental exercises because chemicals like dopamine and acetylcholine, we can control with focus, right? You can pull up thoughts to of things that you look forward to doing in the future, and that will raise dopamine. You can train your ability to focus that will raise acetylcholine. So adding that component in, and then looking at the lifestyle and certain biological stressors and minimizing that. Because what happens with Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration, there's always this balance between brain cell growth and brain cell loss. And in dementia and cognitive decline, you get massive brain cell loss, and brain cell growth levels decline. So what we want to do is we want to keep the brain chock full of growth factors like BDNF, which is like miracle growth for the brain. And this is where you need a full comprehensive program. So my principle with like Alzheimer's is stack the deck to your brain's advantage. Get the nutrition in, get the physical exercise, get the mental exercise, do some neurotherapy. And when you approach it with that full holistic approach, now you're getting every variable working together. And then you can really make some significant progress with Alzheimer's and with dementia. And there's really, really great research. And that's where like they're even showing that gamma hertz frequency stimulation can actually help dissolve all Alzheimer's plaques in the brain. So I'll use the neuromodulation tech I use and send in those frequencies to those parts of the brain that the research has shown that helps to restore memory and reduce plaques. I've also scientifically studied hypnosis and trance. And trance increases theta gamma coherence, which theoretically could help restore memory and be anti-Alzheimer's. So really, for me, my job is to put the pieces of the puzzle together, customize them to the individual, to give their brain the best chance to heal.
Beautiful. So if you had a megaphone and the whole world was listening for the next 30 seconds, what would you want them to know about the brain?
Um, I would want everyone to know that in life, you do not have to accept yourself. You can create yourself.
Mm.
And we have the power of neuroplasticity, which is every thought we think, behavior we perform, experience we have, is altering the firing and wiring of our brain from moment to moment. And it's not that we only use 10% of our brain, we only use 10% of the ways that our brain is capable of firing. So, all of you listening to this, get out there, get exploring, get creating, and really discover what your brain is truly capable of as you begin to optimize all the key variables that control your neurochemical state. You go and you optimize your nutrition, what you put in your body. You start to design your environment to produce the optimal stimulus for your brain. You go and you got to learn a little NLP, learn a little psychology, develop greater control of your mind. Thought is the ultimate sculptor of our brain and biology. Then you know what? Maybe you want to explore a little bit of neurotherapy and ways to balance your neurology. Maybe you want to come, do a brain scan with Chris and have me dial in an exact program to help you balance and optimize your neurology. Then, of course, we didn't even get to the physical exercise part yet, which is maybe the most scientifically studied way to optimize your neurology. And when you optimize those 5 variables and then the added 6th variable, the bonus, is finding a sense of spiritual purpose in life, right? Everything, there's got to be a higher purpose and power that pulls you forward into the future, that really brings life and connects to your spirit and soul. So really connecting with that spiritual purpose and way of giving back and making the world a better place. And if you optimize those 6 variables, you're going to take your brain from 0 to hero. Just watch.
Amazing. So, one sort of ancillary question. What are your thoughts on alcohol?
Alcohol, deactivate my frontal lobe, dehydrate my brain, decrease
I thought you were going to say that.
it's got to be some really kind of special occasion to imbibe a little alcohol. But so,
Got it. What about coffee?
coffee. Coffee gets a lot of controversy out there. But you know what? Coffee is loaded with antioxidants. Even caffeine itself is neuroprotective. It's the dose makes the poison. So if you could keep it between 1 to 3 cups of coffee, in that range, most of the research and even physiologically, that should be a good range for people. Now, there's different types of caffeine metabolizers. So for you, if caffeine sticks around in your system a lot, you could have maybe a cup of coffee. I love the smell, the aroma of coffee. It's a morning thing. So I totally understand that. So the cup of Java in the morning, I give it a thumbs up. It's just, maybe come midday afternoon, you're switching over to more green tea, which has L-theanine, which will help stabilize GABA levels, has nice antioxidants, which also help to burn fat, e.g. CG. So, maybe a cup or 2 of coffee in the morning, maybe a cup of green tea early afternoon, and that should be a nice optimal caffeine dose for everyone watching. But of course, tailor it to your own neurology.
Awesome. Chris, how do people find you? How do they follow you? How do they stay connected?
Yeah, so I post most of my, ongoing day-to-day kind of journey and doings and studies and testing on my social media pages, my professional pages. The Game Changer, Chris Wyllie. That's on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, Chris Wyllie. Gonna build the YouTube up as well. They can go to my website to contact and work with me directly, thegamechangerchriswyllie.com. And if you're interested in exploring how to optimize your brain and learn more about nutrition, learn more about psychology, learn more about neuroscience, and learn how to apply it in a really fun, practical way, understandable way, I'd love to connect with everyone who's
And
watching.
we'll put that all in the show notes. And I have another question because you said something so fascinating. I wanted to ask you about dreaming. You said that the neurons dreaming.
Yes.
You said that the neurons reverse fire. Is that a way of cleansing out what needs to be cleansed? Tell us what you
Yes.
know about dreaming.
Absolutely. So, some researchers found they studied neurons in the hippocampus, the part of the brain that plays a big role in memory consolidation, and they found that during sleeping states and resting states, that neurons actually fire electrically in reverse. Normally, yeah, which is really profound. I saw that, I was like mind blown by that finding, because normally the signal comes in through the dendrites to the soma, the cell body, to the axon and the axon terminal. And during sleep, it electrically fires in reverse. And that was shown to help chemically and electrically reset the cell for new learning, to wipe out unimportant information, consolidate important information, and then most importantly, electrically recharge the neurons to restore their charge to promote further activation when one wakes up and they return to consciousness.
So dreaming, even if you have a confusing dream or a frustrating dream, can actually be the brain's way of healing and cleansing itself out.
Well, now we're talking about dream interpretation.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Different subject here.
what do my dreams mean?
Mm.
Well, there's a huge mechanical piece where during REM sleep, so the frontal lobes deactivate, and the other lobes of the brain, temporal lobes, occipital lobes, parietal lobes, the amygdala, limbic system, they have increased connectivity and firing. So that's where there's heightened emotionality in our dreams. And that's where our dreams can go in all kinds of random ways. Without the frontal lobes there to organize it and make sense of it. Now, an interesting thing happens is that there's no ATP production during REM sleep. And what that does is it stops us from physically going and acting out our dreams. You're supposed to do that in real life, ladies and gentlemen.
Good one. Okay, cool. So, is there such a thing as healthy dreaming and not healthy dreaming?
Yes. So typically, when I look at clients, dreaming is a sign of brain health. It's a sign that you're getting REM sleep. It's also tied to choline because there's no monoamine like dopamine, norepinephrine during dream states. It's only acetylcholine being released. So choline, fixing choline should also help with dreaming and help with sleep and learning. But generally speaking, REM sleep and dreaming is a sign of brain health. So, ladies and gentlemen, dream away.
So, but some people have good dreams, a lot of people have confusing dreams, a lot of people have bad dreams. Any comments on brain health and what kind of dreams you have?
Um, well, I mean, as I said, generally, dreaming is associated with brain health. If you're dealing with, nightmares or bad dreams, um, this is where you might want to actually proactively program your subconscious mind before sleep
Mm,
to send it in better directions to
mm,
actually activate the circuits of the brain that you want reactivated and consolidated during sleep. Whether that's your favorite books or whether that's visualizing your dreams or whether that's thinking of activities you want to perform. So now your brain has the imprint, the process while in a dream state. And then also, that's where the therapy work, the NLP work, and the trance work can be really effective to help people to be mentally prepared for sleep. It's kind of like the same thing when people do like ayahuasca or these different trips. You always want to be mentally prepared by before going through any psychotropic experience. Otherwise, you're just gonna open up the floodgates to the brain and you're gonna hold on for dear life and find out what happens when you're there, which can be a rough trip for a lot of people.
yes, absolutely. Final question, nootropics.
hmm
What are your favorite ones? What have you seen as far as this playing a role in people getting healthier brain function?
Okay. So here's the thing: nootropics, supplements, these are all tools. So when I started exploring how every single nootropic you could possibly imagine changes the brain and testing them. Whether that was from European pharmacies, I did the send them from overseas, whether that's things like paracetam, the racetams, or different, pharmaceutical nootropics. I explored, nutritional amino acids, of course, lots of natural herbs. Now I've gone to the point where it's the minimal effective dose, where it's just basic natural herbs, um, the minimal amount to get the maximal effect. Because what happens is we have good neurological memory. Once you've experienced a state of consciousness, your brain can remember it and get back to it more easily. So nowadays, I just use just basic herbs, like some of my favorite ginkgo, rhodiola, schizandra berry. Um, I like also when I'm up in Canada in the forest, I can actually find wild lion's mane, prepare my own alcohol dual extractions. I love things like reishi mushroom as well, really anti-anxiety, mood boosting, opens up the spirit. But this is a really a customized question. If you're not eating a lot of fish, you're probably deficient in omega-3 fatty acids. Therefore, you probably need to supplement. You're not eating a lot of seafood, you're probably deficient in iodine, causing your thyroid to be low. And iodine is also a major antioxidant in the brain, so you need some form of iodine. So that there's probably a need for supplementation there. So you really got to customize the nootropic recommendations to the individual. But I like things that are loaded in phytochemicals, which raise BDNF in the brain. I just drink a lot of green tea. I like increasing more blood flow to the brain. Blood flow always helps to bring more nutrients to the brain. And that's where, whether it's something like ginkgo, I like things that are adaptogenic, that modulate stress, like the reishi and rhodiola. And then you got those three things, and then your nutrition takes over. Choline-rich foods, phytochemical-rich foods, omega-3 rich foods, and just the basics is all you need.
What are
And
your
then you got,
recommendations as far as finding clean, healthy seafood or fish? Because a lot of fish has mercury in it.
yeah. Um, well, again, obviously you want to eat smaller fish so they bioaccumulate less toxins. I love things like wild sockeye salmon. You just can't overcook it. If you just undercook it a little bit, it doesn't dry out. And you can find different recipes for it. So wild sockeye salmon is probably my favorite. I probably eat that twice a week. Um, just for the omega-3s. Even grass-fed meats have more omega-3 compared to conventional meats. Whole eggs are really great. So you can find ways to make it happen. I mean, I love seafood. If you get a chance to eat raw oysters and they're high quality, loaded in brain select nutrients, you will feel not only neurologically invigorated, you will feel physically invigorated. So yeah, find your seafoods that work for you, and then employ natural detoxification. So if you're eating lots of green vegetables and even herbs like rosemary, sage, oregano, these are things that naturally help to remove heavy metals from our body.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Folks, you've been listening to Chris Wyllie, neuroscientist. You can find him at the Game Changer, Chris, Chris, Wyllie, Wyllie. And Chris, thanks so much for being here today on Next Level Healing.
Tara, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you.
This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions are expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.